After the primary focus of my spiritual path, for many years having been studying and teaching and also going on pilgrimages with the Way of Mastery group, it now became two major strands. The first strand being still the Way of Mastery, and the second being a yoga teacher training and yoga community that I got to connected with called Live, Love, Teach. So I initially did my 200-hour training, so I was a facilitated teacher. But then I would go to some of the other trainings as well, particularly the spirituality trainings that Live, Love, Teach were running. And sometimes was brought in as kind of someone who was helping to teach a bit of the spirituality part of it. So this weaving occurs for the next several years, starting in 2012, just before my yoga training, and going all the way through 2016 at a place in Rhode Island called Eden Manor. It's a place where I was doing my weekly Way of Mastery groups with a dear friend, Bernadette Eden, and she and her husband owned this large bed and breakfast called Eden Manor. And in addition to hosting the Way of Mastery weekly meetings, we started, and I was helping to bring the people in, and she was hosting and running the whole thing. She started hosting both Live, Love, Teach yoga training workshops at her place. Everybody could stay there, and there was a workshop room there. And also JM's Way of Mastery retreats. He had ones there in between 2012 and 2016 every year, and Philip, I think between 2013 and 15 or so, something like that, had regular yoga teacher trainings there. At the first yoga teacher training and at the last Way of Mastery gathering I'd been to, those were in 12 and 13, there had been this connection with Atlantis and the history of Atlantis and the energies of Atlantis and how that was coming back in. It was symbolized, and I'm connecting with Jeshua on these things. He's guiding me around this. They're all challenging edges for me. You know, this is not where I started with this, but I won't hedge on it. We'll just tell the story. One of the key things about the Live, Love, Teach training, in which a lot of the Atlantean things were revealed, was that the group size was 28 people, and that was significant for some reason. Well, what happened in the first several gatherings, both of JM's group, the Way of Mastery group at Eden Manor, this would be like a week-long retreat once a year type of thing, and the Live, Love, Teach trainings, was that they were exactly 28 people, I believe, the next two JM meetings and one with Philip. So exactly 28 is pretty unusual. It wasn't being planned, and the message I got was, this is continuing the work around the Atlantean subject, around healing things from those days, bringing back a lot of the frequencies and even technologies and wisdom and things that were there present at that time, bringing in essentially energetically, to start with, New Atlantis. There's a lot that went on during this time. I'm not going to go through all the different workshops. One of the most profound revelations that came out for me was at a Live, Love, Teach training. And I was going to all of these, or many of these, so I'd go to one of the Live, Love, Teach yoga trainings, and then a few months later to a Way of Mastery thing, both at Eden Manor, and I was the only one going to both, and I was seeing this weaving of energies as to how they were supporting each other. At one of the Live, Love, Teach trainings, the facilitator, whose name is Philip Urso, came up with this brilliant insight. It was a spirituality-focused training, and he told the group, we're trying to investigate how yoga puts you in a spiritual state. He says, and understand ego, and this is a brilliant Course in Miracles facilitator and teacher too, so he understands the Course. Understand ego, when you start getting near its home base, it will defend itself. And it defends itself through deflection, through attack, through unconsciousness, through lots of projection, lots of different ways. Said, so when you notice disturbance coming up, it might be because you're getting close to a breakthrough around the ego. And he'd said this at the beginning of this spirituality training, one of the several that were at Eden Manor over these years, the culminating one in my mind. So throughout the week, I'd managed to go to 3 consecutive yoga trainings, having manifested a really profound fear right beforehand, so that I could see how the training helped me walk through it. And it was very powerful in doing so. And so I got to intimately sort of witness this in myself. And I'd manifested this profound fear in this going into this yoga training, this spirituality training. And it was a fear I hadn't been able to break no matter what happened, no matter what I did. It was it was a family issue, so I don't want to get into it, but I was really terrified about it. And so for 3 months, I'd been in this fear loop. And I'm judging myself because, I've been doing all this spiritual work all this time. I shouldn't be in a fear loop. I should be able to break this, I'm thinking. That's not helping. So we're in this yoga teacher training, and every day Philip's teaching, we're doing the yoga and so on. We're also investigating how does yoga put you in a spiritual state. So Philip knows I channel Jeshua, and he's very connected with Jeshua himself. And throughout the training, we keep going back to this subject. And I'm noticing throughout the training, is anything working on alleviating my fear? And it sounds simple, but this is the process that happened for me. I'm repeating these thoughts in my mind that are the fearful thoughts. And at one point, Philip's partner, and I won't mention her name because that's her business. I haven't asked if it's okay to mention her. Philip and I are old friends, so I'm going to trust that he doesn't mind me mentioning him. She asks a question. She says, so, when you're in a fearful state or disturbed state, you can just start looking at your thoughts and you can simply ask, is it true? Is this fearful thought that I'm having true? I had this one the other day like this. Like, how the people who tell you that, well, if you don't believe in such and such and such, if you don't say some words and devote yourself to Jesus Christ in the new Christian church or whatever, that you're going to hell forever, that type of you're going to go to hell forever if you don't repent thing. And I thought to myself, well, that's scary. I feel into that. And maybe they're right, because my Course in Miracles training tells me that I don't really know what anything is, so maybe be open to the idea that anything might be right. And then I thought about it. I thought, just asking this question, is that true? Do I know that it's true? You don't have to know that it's not true. You just have to, ask this question. Am I cosmically certain, absolutely positively certain that what they're saying is true? And if not, is it honest to move forward as if you know that it is? So this is a huge point of inquiry and spiritual awakening right here. People tend to believe the thoughts that are being generated in their head, which, really they're meant to be taken metaphorically, not literally, like dreams at night. They're metaphors for something going on. So if the thought pops into your head, oh, you're going to go to hell forever, it may have more to do with what's going on in your system now and something that needs some attention than the fact that, no, somebody's going to go to hell forever. And I just thought about that subject for the first time in ages, and I thought, going to go to hell forever. Like, do they have any evidence of that? Like, have they ever interviewed anybody who's gone to hell forever? I mean, by definition, the forever part makes it so they can't have any evidence, any proof of it. I mean, maybe there's somebody who's been in hell for, a trillion years, but they get out. I mean, how do they know? In other words, the point I'm trying to make is simple mental clarity is such an essential part of the spiritual practice. And it's embodied in this simple question, do I even know that this is true? And then the second part of that is, am I treating it as if I know it's true? That's the dishonest piece, you see? If you're behaving as if you know something is true that you don't know is true. So in this yoga teacher training, Philip's partner, who's co-facilitating with him, just it tells the students, you can just ask this. You can just look at the thoughts as if they're clouds moving by in your head, and you can look at that one and go, oh, that's interesting. Don't need to give it that much attention. I wonder what the next thought is. Or you can ask, is it even true? But I like this one of just letting them go by. And I'd heard this before, but applying it in this situation had a different impact for me. So I just look at this fearful thought, about a family issue. Really, the essential well-being of someone with one of the closest people in my life. And a more terrifying situation than I care to recount at this time. And it's a private thing, so I can't really. But just trust me, deep, profound fear. And then I just look at it and I go, whoa. Like, oh, that's just let's just treat it like a thought going by like clouds. And ask the question, oh, okay, I see it. I wonder what the next thought is. So I did that with this thought that was recurring for 3 months and causing tremendous fear for me over and over and over again. And when I did it, it released. And I was amazed because I'd been doing this process with it for 3 months and nothing had released it. So it's released, and it wants to come back. It's like trying to come back. And I just go, yeah, I wonder what the next thought is. Not that I'm that interested. I'm just looking at clouds go by. But I wonder what the next one will be. And then for the first time in my life, and the only time, I felt my egoic voice actually manifest into like a physical voice in my head. And it just said to me, what the fuck do you think you're doing? And it was like it had its hand around my throat like that. So I noticed this thought come up. What the fuck do you think you're doing? I've got you. You can't get out of this. And I just thought again, oh, that was the next thought. I wonder what the next thought will be. And then the ego goes completely silent. So I thought, wow, something happened there. So I wanted to bring this back to the group. And a little while later, and yoga students are ideal for this type of thing. And when we were having this spiritual discussion later in the week, and Philip was talking about this, I just brought this up, and I thought, well, what happened exactly? And what had happened was I had asked a question that only the observer mind could ask. So we talk about two minds, reactive mind, which is always just kind of going like this, active and reacting and defending, and small egoic mind are other words for it. And then there's the observer mind. And the observer mind is, well, just what it says it is, observing, but it's also called higher mind or Christ mind. And one of the beautiful teachings in the Way of Mastery is all healing is a result of switching your identification of who you think you are. Which voice do you think you are? Of switching your identification with being the defensive, reactive, angry, whatever it is, agitated, small mind, reactive mind, switching from that to identifying with being the observer mind. And yoga's doing this all the time by bringing attention to breath and so on. So I thought, okay, maybe in the middle of this conversation, I'll just ask the group. I had this experience. I explained my experience of breaking the fear. And I realized I was asking a question only observer mind could ask. And so I said to the group, does anybody else have any examples of questions only observer mind could ask? And again, Philip had warned them of this idea of the ego defending itself, but through chaotic distraction. So virtually everyone in the room instantly like that goes blah, blah, and starts talking about random things. They talk about the weather. They talk about the date they went on last week. The whole room, which was quiet, explodes into this chattering conversation of distraction. Beautiful example of what Philip had warned about. So Philip brings attention to the class that this is what's going on. And the class goes, oh my God, wow, that's exactly what we were just had by the ego. And there's also this deep desire not to be had anymore, not to be fooled anymore. But what do you do in that situation? What's the next step? Well, yoga students are great at this because they're disciplined with breath awareness and so on. So the next step is just, it's what yoga students do to get into observer state. And Joshua was a yoga student too, yoga master. And so you just put 100% of your attention on your next breath, observing it come in and out of the body. And that transitions you back into the observer. So the whole group is just guided to take a deep breath together and then release the breath. And after that, the room exploded with original ideas of what questions might be that only observer mind could ask. And I saw this as this essential, profound transmission of a new awareness of things. Later in the same gathering, I was asked to do the samadhi. Is that what it's called? I haven't done this in so long. Samadhi at the end of the yoga routine. That's kind of giving away my lack of yoga practice lately. But I was asked to do that and then to give a little meditation at the end And though it wasn't really shared with the group, because again, it's a yoga group, it was Joshua giving the meditation. And he shared this very interesting thing that I think is an essential teaching for our new age. He shared that what this is, this breath awareness, this switch from identification from reactive mind into observer mind, could be called communion. This is true communion. In this case, he called it new communion. It's what he actually taught, but in our age, it seems new. New communion is the return to true communion. And communion, as it has been taught for so long, is the body and the blood. Yes, the body, the blood of Christ, the body of Christ. But new communion and true communion has always been breath and spirit, and how our attention to breath links us with spirit. And in the way of Master, he shares that the way of the Holy Spirit is the presence, is in the physical presence of the breath, is the Holy Spirit. So this first step, it's in mindfulness, it's in yoga, it's in all of these things, stress reduction and all these programs. It doesn't need to be religious. It doesn't. In fact, it can't be, because it won't reach a large enough audience in our world. But everyone, every school, mindfulness is a form of what we're talking about. Mindfulness is shown to help all populations, all at-risk populations, prisoners, autistic kids, ADD, addicts, everybody improves. For a 2-hour mindfulness training changes their life in positive ways. It costs almost nothing. So this idea that, for example, say somebody's being prescribed oxycodone, which is a huge issue, right? The oxy thing. Getting to the point where it's necessary, because it would be considered irresponsible for a physician not to make sure that that person, if they're getting oxy, also has to go to, say, 3 yoga or mindfulness teachings. Or anyone who's coming in at an at-risk population in a prison, every prisoner needs to have mindfulness training every month. Anyone who's an at-risk population, kids, autistic kids in schools, kids with ADD, everything. And this is this beautiful work that really was found from the ground up. And I believe that one of the things Philip's going to bring into the world, he's going to bring this in a big way, so that becomes the standard medical procedure. All originating out of this, for me, in my experience of it, was this beautiful weaving of Jeshua's presence, both in the way of mastery teachings and in the yoga teachings. And so the spiritual journey is going in lots of new directions now. This is from the era about 2012 through about 2015. I'm not going to go into this all too much more these years. There's a lot going on. But just wanted to share this one experience that I think is a foundational new building block for modern awareness and modern spirituality. New communion. Thank you for listening.